That's good. That's good right there. It's okay. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. You hear me okay? All right. Well, I'm happy to be here and delighted to meet new people and to share about the word. The topic that I kind of like is the temple. It's always it's always nice to see people. Where are they? Where are they? Where are they? They know me from the time I was learning Torah out here in Brandon. There you are. You know, it's kind of nice to see people when they know you from the beginning. Like when I was starting and asking too many questions and accused of being too zealous for the Torah. Remember? Thank you, my brother. Appreciate it very much. Yeah. So they would say, "Oh, you're too zealous for the Torah. You ask too many questions." Well, if you want to learn, you have to ask questions, right? I have my wife with me, and all of you, a lot of you, who doesn't know my wife? This is Yolanda. Saluda, mi amor. Yeah? She's definitely the better part of me, for sure. I have my youngest son, Tito. And I got my oldest son, Rico. There's somebody behind the beard there. Somewhere in there, right? So I'm very happy to be here. Today what I'm going to do, my brother David Jones, I got a question for you. Is it okay if I announce my website and some other courses I'm doing? I'm making sure, bro. You're the boss here. All right. I have a temple course in Spanish, December. Oh, no, not that. Wait a minute. Is that racist? You know America now. Everything's racist, right? Yeah. Okay, so we have the Spanish course in December in Davenport, Florida. And then we have the Spanish temple course, which is 102 in Spanish. And the English one in January is 105. 104. Okay, 104. Now, if you didn't take 1 through 3, don't worry about it. I call it 101, 2, 3, and 4 because we teach different topics within the temple. So you haven't really, you'll catch up. You'll be good. Okay? ¿Cómo está José Elena? Me alegro verlo. Un placer. See, I'm speaking Spanish, speaking in tongues. No one's translating right now. My friends from Naples, good friends of mine. All right, so I want to announce those two things, but especially I want to announce this to you. This year is going to be a little different because this year we're going to have what is called a virtual reality copy of the Second Temple period. We're going to be able to have, finally, we're getting it done. It's supposed to be finished by October what? Supposedly by October 6th. Now, the guys who are doing this, they're the guys who work for Hobbit, for Lord of the Rings, and all those movies. They do all kinds of stuff like that. And they do temple stuff. And now we will be able to hire them to build us a temple, Second Temple period, and teach from that in virtual reality. So the way it's going to work, we have a screen, okay, and then you'll be able to watch what the person with the goggles is doing while I'm teaching. So you'll be able to basically see what's inside, and we take turns, you know, who can walk in through it. Now, also we're going to have a special guest. I'm working on that. I can't promise it. We just found another organization who are doing the third Ezekiel's temple, the Millennial Reign Temple, in virtual reality. So they may be invited for the English temple course to come on so everybody can see it. So things are really happening. You know, I did a temple class in Perth, Australia this year. I did a temple course in Hamilton, New Zealand this year. I'm doing temple stuff in Chile. Bogotá. I done a temple course in Paraguay, Puerto Rico. It's growing. It's happening. Peru this year. For some reason, now everybody wants to learn about the temple. Now, something peculiar is really happening, which is kind of unique for me. Indiana, we're doing it over there too. So, I mean, Canada next year. I mean, things are really happening. But something really unique is beginning to happen that I got to be honest with you, I need you to pray for me. Okay? Because now I'm getting invited to all kinds of churches. I'm getting invited to all kinds of churches talking about mainstream Christianity who want to know about the Torah and the temple. And I got to be honest with you, I'm like excited, happy, delighted, but that scares the living daylights out of me. Because, you know, for so long, there's been some kind of separation. But it's interesting that the places that I've been getting invited to, they all want to learn about the temple. So that's becoming like the bridge. I just spoke this morning across the street. You know, I'm finishing here, and then I'm going to Nereida, you know, Shoner Tamid, congregation at 6 o'clock in Spanish. So things are happening. Please keep me in your prayers because it's really, really happening. You know, the Lord has been good. And, you know, some of you know me from, you know, how many years? Yeah, 2002, 2099, I think, and 2000. You know, and the Lord is doing something. I'm very grateful. I never imagined. I had a vision. You know, I knew a vision in the sense of having a vision where you want to go to. And I tried to do as best as I could. And the Lord blessed me with a perfect opposite. Because without her, I would not be a better teacher today. I got to tell you, I'm a better teacher today, not because I'm all that good. It's just that she compliments me and she tells me the things that I need to understand. That, Rico, your way sometimes is not the best way. So just because you're right doesn't mean you're right. So I had to learn to lean my ear towards my wife and to learn. And because of it, now I'm getting invited to congregations, and I'm still teach the Torah in its context without compromising it, but also trying to get it to be a bridge of edification to the body of Messiah and other Christians who don't know, who really want to seek out. For so long. And I gotta make this statement. For so long, I was on the opposite side of the spectrum. We become so wounded that I'll become a problem. I became a Torah terrorist. I was always trying to attack, not knowing, not thinking that 99.9% of the people in the systems of religion were just like us. We didn't know anything. We was trying to find out. And now the most humbling thing is having pastors and leaders come to me and say, will you teach us? And that's really overwhelming, because honestly, whatever I know is because the Lord shared with me, and I have a good teacher. You know, I have a good teacher in the temple, and I'm very grateful to the Father for providing a good teacher in the temple. His name is Joseph Good, and I've always believed in giving honor to honors due. 7-8 years ago, I felt prompted to call him and say, will you teach me? I want to be your student. I want to start learning from scratch. And it's the best decision I've made. Because instead of me focusing on thinking that I knew anything, I was willing to start from scratch and say, I want to learn. And I submit to you that as believers in Yeshua, don't ever get into a position thinking that you have it figured out. We're learning. This is a journey, you know? And there are times when some things you'll have it well managed. Some of the stuff you may have to adapt as you learn and change. I mean, you know, how much have I changed since you know me? A lot. I like to think I keep growing. You know, and if we stop growing, we're going to get stale, and then we're going to become a cancer to the movement instead of bringing healing to the movement. So I need you to keep me in your prayers. Things are really happening, and what I want you to pray specifically is for this, that the Father raises others, other teachers, men and women, who are zealous for the Torah, who are willing to edify the body, that we can become a lifeline for many who are seeking to learn so that they can go out and teach. Because one person cannot do it all. This is a team. Right? And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the function in the body using temple principles, connecting it with this week's Torah portion. Is that okay? All right. Father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I praise you and I thank you for the opportunity to serve you. I'm grateful for the honor that you've given us to be your servants. Thank you for bringing clarity of mind and heart and soul, for bringing your Torah near to our hearts, for allowing us to see it and embrace it and eat of the fruit of it. Allow us not to be selfish and hang on to the tree and not share it with those who need it. But in turn, O Lord, to be patient, loving kindness, have compassion the way you had it with us, to edify all those people who are seeking after the fruit of life, who are seeking after the well of living waters. That we remember our beginnings and the times of brokenness, and that we remember that we are here to serve you. We're not here to oppress anyone. That we're here to serve you and lead others to you. In the name of Yeshua, we pray. Amen. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I have a teaching that I did on this year's temple course in English. It's called The Temple Language in the New Testament. But I'm only going to cover part of it because I want to connect it with the structure. Now, many times when we study the Bible, one of the problems that happens in the body of Messiah is that we do not quite understand the function that we have. How many of you have been to my temple course? Raise your hand. I know you've been to my temple course. Look around. You see them. Please ask them, how did you like it? I know you eat well. Yeah. Right? We don't play around with the food. We're Puerto Ricans. Right, Jose? We want you to feel so full that you just want to sit there and learn. You know? One of the problems that happen in the body of Messiah is the fact that sometimes we do not understand our function. So something that is called encroachment always comes in. Encroachment is when someone begins to encroach or get into your area of expertise and they want to do your job. The problem is they're not called to do your job. They have a job to do, but they don't understand that they have a gift themselves, but they don't know their own gifts. So what they do is they minimize your gift. They attack your integrity and your honor because they need to be heard. Everyone needs to be heard. Everyone has the right to be important. Everyone in God's eyes has a place of importance. The problem is that we don't want to wait for our turn for Him to exalt us. We want to exalt ourselves. Okay? Now the temple teaches you, it gives you the blueprint as to how God uses everyone's gift. And in its proper time, you are the most important person at that moment. Like, for example, I could talk here, I could literally talk 4 hours. I'm not saying you'll like it, but I could talk 4 hours. But there comes a point in the conversation that you no longer want to hear because you're hungry. It could be the most overwhelming information, life-changing information, but when you get hungry, you're thinking, I'm hungry. And the most important person in the room becomes, who's the cook? Right? And then you eat and you're satisfied, and then you got to go to the bathroom. Who's the most important person? The person who cleaned the bathroom so that you can do what you need to do. Get it? So we all have a function. So my question to you is, what is your function in the kingdom of God? And if we would learn that, we will make the job of our brother over here, a lot easier. Because then once he can identify your gift and your talents, then his job as a leader, as a pastor, is to facilitate for you to work within your gift. Amen. Now your job is to do your job to the best of the ability. Now let me ask you a question, my brother. What do you do for a living? Perfect. Even perfect. But before you owned, you have to pay the dues, right? So when you were paying your dues and you started working in the lawn service, you had to do what the boss said, correct? And then you learned your own way. You found your own niche. But you didn't try to impose your own niche on your boss. You just did. He gave you some autonomy. As long as you did the job and you did it well, he didn't care how you did it. Am I right? But then you found something. And then eventually you say, you know what? I think I can manage people. Maybe the boss saw some gifts in you. And then you said, I think I want to own my own business. Now, so therefore now you hire people, and the first day one guy comes around, he wants to do your job. He wants to tell you what to do. He wants to tell you who to hire, not to hire. How long is he going to last in your business? Thank you. Right? Because his job is to work for you. Now, your job is to facilitate, right? To give him the jobs that you know he's able to do. Because your job depends on his gift and how well he does it. So if he is not good at doing one thing, and he does it one time and he messes it up, which costs you a contract, well, guess what? He has value. It's just that's not his gift. Find the gift. Don't throw him away. The systems of religion just disposes people out like they don't value anything. They're not value. So instead, God says, no, everyone has a value. Let me give you an example. In this week's Torah portion, we have Pinchas. Now, who was Pinchas? Pinchas, let's go to Numbers, chapters 25, please. One of my passions is the Torah portions. You learn so much. But yet, out of 613 commandments, 279 deal with the temple. 45% of the commandments deal with the temple, but yet we don't study the temple. But I'm going to give you an example of how there was a family in the Bible. A few weeks back, we talked about Korah, right? How he tried to do the job of somebody else and he died. But this guy carried the ark. His family were in charge of carrying the ark of the covenant and all the holy utensils. Now, they could not cover it, but they will carry it. Can you imagine if your family is in charge of carrying the ark of the covenant? No, but he wanted the job Moses had. He wanted the job of Aaron. He wanted the priesthood. Now, notice who he recruited. He recruited Reuben. Reuben was supposed to be the firstborn of the firstborn blessing, and in the ancient world, the firstborn carried the what? The priestly duties of the family. You follow? So now Korah says, yo man, I want Aaron's job. So who does he recruit? The one who should have had that job a long time ago. And then he says, yo, can you believe this guy? Yeah, man, that should have been my job. But you know what? If I come in cahoots with you, then when we take those guys out, then you become the high priest and I become something else. And that shows you in a congregation, when someone wants to take the job of the pastor, he's going to recruit the people that are hurting, the complainers. People with family issues, all of a sudden now the ones easily recruited, the complainers. The pattern is here. You study the temple, you understand, you can actually see the things that are going to happen in your congregation. If you can cook, let me know. I'll make you the best cook. I'll give you all the tools so you can cook. Now, once you have the job and your gift, if you start complaining, you got a problem. See, sometimes we want the Lord to use us, but then we're not happy the way He's using us. So let me give you an example of how faithful God is, that even though sometimes we mess up, He doesn't throw us away. He still finds a place for us to serve Him. Okay. So Pinchas is in charge of the priestly guard. Korah was supposed to be in charge of all the holy utensils. So when you go to Numbers 25, you have the evidence of Pinchas standing for the holiness of the camp. There was moral sin, and then Pinchas killed Cosby and Zimri. The Lord makes a covenant of peace because he was zealous for his name. I'm not endorsing for you to grab a spear and go kill people. That's not the context. But Pinchas' job was the leader of the temple guard, the leader of the tabernacle guard. Where do we find that? Rico, where do we find that? In 2 Chronicles chapters 9. 1 Chronicles chapters 9. But in reading this, if you start reading in chapter 6, you have the Levitical line, the musicians, you have generation of Aaron, and all that stuff. But in chapters 9, something interesting happens. When you begin reading in verse 17, and it says, and the gatekeepers were Shallum, Akub, Talmon, Ahiman, and their brethren. Shallum was their chief. Verse 18, until then, they have been gatekeepers for the camp of the children of Levi and at the king's gate of the east. Now Shallum, the son of Korah, right? And the sons of Esav, the sons of Korah, get it? So not all the sons of Korah died. That means that even his family recognized that Korah, the father, was not doing the right thing, and they not supported him. That's a tough choice. Dad, you're going the wrong way. You're going that way, and I'm going to serve God. And because of what Korah did, his descendants have to suffer the lack of promotion. They got demoted, but they were not thrown away. You're not ready for that responsibility. I gave you this honor, and you want to take the whole thing, right? It's like somebody tells you who is a foreign alien who comes over here, becomes a congressperson, and then wants to tell you how racist you are. You give them the hospitality, you give them citizenship, you give them a place to live from beautiful, peaceful, prosperous Somalia, comes to this country now telling you how bad you live. You have it here? Gratitude is important. So now watch this. Shallum, the son of Korah, the sons of Esav, the sons of Korah, and his brethren from the father's house, the Korahites, were in charge of the work of the service, gatekeepers of the tabernacle. Their father had been keepers of the entrance of the camp of the Lord. And Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, have been the officer over them in time past. The Lord was with them. In other words, these guys were in charge of carrying all the holy utensils, but after the sin of them trying to usurp Aaron and Moses, God says, you're not going to have that job anymore. Your sons are not going to be gatekeepers. They got demoted, but not excluded. Sometimes we eliminate ourselves from God's blessing, not from His salvation, from His blessing because we want to work without our realm of God's calling. Is this making sense? This is a very important principle. So let's go to the PowerPoint. I want to show you some things. Okay? What I'm going to do, I'm going to try to do my best to show you the administration of the temple. How many of you have never studied administration of the temple? Perfect. So this is the right thing. Yeah. So there you go. Okay, so we have the temple, the beautiful house. Amazing house. I love that. I love that. Someday, the house of the Lord will be restored, but that's another conversation altogether. All right? So, okay. We are commanded to keep the commandments, and we are commanded to study the temple. In Ezekiel 44:23, And they shall teach my people the difference between holy and common, and show them to distinguish between clean and unclean. Now, again, when I ask you these questions and when I try to challenge you in a positive way, I'm not trying to be mean in any way. But how many of us actually teach on these principles? If we learn about holy and profane, clean and unclean, a lot of the issues within your congregations will be over. A lot of the issues, decision makings that you have to make when people commit certain mistakes, deal with clean, unclean, moral sin and ritual sin. We don't know the differences, and then people get offended and they leave. Holy and profane. If we learn that, and what the biblical establishes as the concrete evidence of a holy and profane is in the Bible, then you will be able to identify it, and you will be able to quickly correct it in a loving manner instead of judging one another and separating the body. So I'm coming from a completely different perspective right now. It's a psychological thing. The Bible has a psychology. The sacrificial system is a psychological way of you understanding that you have found favor in the eyes of God, that you can go back home happily knowing that you follow the steps as He prescribed them, and if you do exactly the way He prescribed them, then when you smell the sweet aroma of the nostrils, of the you smell it, you know, okay, I have found favor, I could go in peace. Okay? It's not a way to manipulate God, because you have to have circumcision of the heart. Clean heart and clean hands. This is making sense. All right, so we are commanded. It says, in a controversy, they shall act as judges. These are the priests, the sons of Aaron. In verse 15, it says, and they shall decide it according to my judgments. They shall keep my laws and my statutes regarding all of my appointed festivals, and thou shalt keep my Sabbath holy. Okay. But Ezekiel 43, and I'm going to move from this, okay, because I want to do something else. Now, many people are going around saying, some people who are lack of understanding of holiness and the temple, that the temple that will be built is the temple of the Antichrist. That makes no logical sense at all. Anyone who really researches the temple will never make that statement. The Bible supports the fact that the temple will be holy. Watch. Ezekiel 44, verse 4 through 8. Read it with me, please, would you? Then he brought me by the way of the north gate to the front of the temple, and I looked, and lo. So I don't understand. If the temple is of the Antichrist, then how can the glory of God dwell in a defiled temple? It makes no sense. Biblically, we know that the presence of God, by the way, you don't have to agree with me. I'm just asking you to allow me to state my case. You know, I'm not here to debate anybody. I'm not even here to convince you. I could care less. If you believe in it, it's not up to me. I'm only here to present the information and let the Spirit of God bear witness to that. Is that okay? Because then it takes pressure away that you have to believe me and me trying to just manipulate just so you don't understand. No, just present the information. You weigh it out. And then the Lord would submit it, and, you know, He'll make it clear for you. Fair enough? So it says, the Lord said to me, mortal, mark well, look closely and listen attentively to all that I shall tell you concerning all the ordinances of the temple of the Lord and His laws. Remember, the temple of God has the glory of the Lord in it. And mark well those who may be admitted to the temple and all those who are to be excluded from the sanctuary. Now, this is for all of us, because you all, I'm Ephraim. How many says Ephraim? Ephraim? Ephraim. Everybody says, I'm Ephraim. I'm not saying that, you know, you say it, but everybody says, I'm Ephraim. Isn't that what happening on in the kingdom right now? But let me give you some news flash. Ephraim in the Bible changed the feast days to the 7th to the 8th month. Ephraim in the Bible changed the temple location from Jerusalem to Dan until Dan. Ephraim in the Bible, Jeroboam and the northern kingdom changed the priesthood from the Levites to the regular people. You want to do the same? That's exactly what's happening. People have different calendars. People want to change the temple now to the city of David. People want to change now to the priesthood to everybody being a high priest. We got problem, folks. We don't study the temple, yet we're using temple language. And we're creating chaos because it goes against the will of God. So I'm not here to argue with you about these things. I'm only here to submit to you a few things that we need to understand. So instead of debating about whether the temple's for us or not, God already made it clear that it's a command. I'm not going to argue with God, but I'm going to share with you the importance of understanding the structure of the temple to help us here in the dispersion how to establish congregations, how to deal with one another, and how to value each other's gifts. How we go that way be more edifying, right? It's a tug of war. Everybody wants to be right. But when was the last time we want God to be exalted through His Word instead of us arguing about whether or not we're right? You know? So, Says, said to the rebellious house of Israel. Thus says who? O house of Israel, let there be an end to all your abominations, in admitting foreigners, uncircumcised in heart and flesh, to be in my sanctuary, profaning my temple. But if it's already the temple of the Antichrist, why would Ezekiel talk about profaning something that's already profaned? You know? And it says, my temple, when you offer to me my food, the fat and the blood, you have broken my covenant with all your abominations. The abominations that are speaking of is the things that I mentioned already. And you have not kept charge of my sacred things. Whose? Jews? Whose sacred thing? The Jews? Or God's sacred stuff? But wait a minute, what is sacred to God when we don't study the temple? That's exactly what he outlines for you, what is sacred and what is not. He tells you sacred spaces. You want to be good. You're going to go through that fence, you got to have this and this requirements. You want to go through that spot, you got to be this type of people. You want to do this, you got to keep yourself this type of ritual purity. We want to go into areas that God did not call us to go into. It's like me, I said it this morning, it's like you invite me to your house, and then your wife, which was, okay, I'm making sure. So, you invite me to your house, and then I start walking around your house uninvited. I sit in your chairs, I tell you how to cook, and then I get lost in your room and your house, and you find me laying in your bed. How well is that going to go? Not too well, right? Because your bedroom is your sacred space. Your bedroom is a holy place. It means separated for a covenantal relation between you and, ask my kids. If they want to go to our bedroom, what do? They knock on the door. When the high priest will go into the Holy of Holies, he makes sure he went when he was invited to go in. So let me get this straight. There are rules of holiness in our house, sacred spaces in your houses, that I have to respect. I cannot go through your window at 2 in the morning. Because in Florida, you're going to get shot. Right? At least it will happen in my house, you know. So what happens is, I cannot be uninvited unless I call you or knock on the door the respectful way through the front door, now the back door. So now we understand this in this civil domain, but when it comes to God's house, we want to enter whichever way we want to. We want to go in whichever day we want to. We want to just transgress His holiness laws, but if you invite me to your house, I have to respect yours. There's a problem, folks. We respect more of our own rules in our sacred spaces than God's house. And I hope we can do a better job changing that perspective. Respecting God's house first to understand the respect in your house. Amen? All right, so let's move on. Now, I want to go through this really quickly because I think it's important. I want to give you the importance of the temple. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm temple. But there's a reason why. You know? It says Genesis 1 through 3, temple text. Consider studying that as a temple text. Exodus chapters 25 to 40. 16 chapters, ladies and gentlemen, 16 chapters in the book of Exodus dealing with the tabernacle. There's 40 in the book of Exodus, and 16 of them deal with the tabernacle. Okay? And then you have the whole book of Leviticus. I mean, it's overwhelming the information you find in the book of Leviticus. It outlines for you exactly. By the way, I always tell my sons, and I tell anybody here who's thinking about getting married sometime in the future, study the Torah with a person who will be your wife or husband for a year. If you can make it through Leviticus, you're good. Seriously. Because you study Leviticus together and it gets to the holiness laws in regards to the conduct of sex between men and women, and then she start objecting or he start objecting, then you got problems. When it gets to the food laws, if the person, both of us have issues with the food laws, you got a problem. Because when you marry, everything magnifies. Newsflash, people, you cannot change anybody. You all fall in love, but I love him. I can change him. No, you can't. Trust me. Okay? It doesn't work like that. All right? Then you have 1st and 2nd Chronicles, temple. Ezra, temple. The whole book of Psalms, temple. Ezekiel, temple. Haggai, temple. Malachi, temple. Luke, chapters 1 and 2. Acts, chapters 1 and 2. By the way, I'm not talking about the gospel when it's talking about Passover, temple. Sabbath, temple. When you have the feast, temple. Everything. Touch a dead person, you got to go to the temple. A woman in menstrual cycle, then if you're going to go to the temple, you got to go through ritual purity. That's another thing. That's why 45% of the commandments deal with the temple. So will you remove the temple from your studies? Then you tell, and I'm going to step on toes. Is that okay? Yep. Thank you. So, I am the temple of the Lord. I am the temple of God. And then they're eating ham sandwich. Now, without judging anybody, because 99% of the time, they're just not aware of the holiness. But can you put a pork or a pig on the altar of the Lord? All right, so now you want to apply the spiritual to the temple, but now you're doing something completely opposite to what happened in the temple. So the physical, it teaches you the spiritual. So if we are a temple of the Lord, we do not have permission to eat anything God says is not holy. If God says this is not holy, it's an abomination, it's not acceptable on my altar, then guess what? If you're a temple of the Lord, then you're not to eat it either. Because you're supposed to represent Him and be separated for Him. You follow? So, the people, the temple, the city, and Israel are all holy to God. The people, the temple, the city of Jerusalem, and all of Israel is holy to the Lord. Therefore, we need to learn holiness laws. How can we understand the book of Hebrews if we do not study the Day of Atonement? Have you ever considered studying the book of Hebrews in the context of the Day of Atonement? If that's the case, then you need to tell me how many times the priest will go into the Holy Holies. Where did he sprinkle the blood in the Day of Atonement? Which animal? Was it a goat or was something else? Where did he pray for the scapegoat? I mean, how many times did he change? How many times did he pronounce the holy name of God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, in the Day of Atonement? I mean, we need to know this because you're going to read. By the way, a simple one. Where was the book of Hebrews written from? In what year was the book of Hebrews written? Why was the book of Hebrews written? Have you ever studied the book of Hebrews in the context of patron-clan relationship? You know, we read all these verses out of context. Well, Hebrews chapter 7 verse this says. Well, don't go there with me because then we have to read chapters, 1 through 7 because chapters 8 verse 1 says, and this is the sum of what we have been telling you. That means that chapters 8 to 13 is a summary. Well, let me throw one little wrench at you. Everyone go to your Bible. Hebrews chapters 9 verse 22. This is not part of the teaching, but I want to throw it in there. Hebrews chapters 9 verse 22. If you're with me, say amen. Amen. Hallelujah. You're not bored yet, are you? Only one of you. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. All right, so watch this. I guarantee you, if I was a betting man, I will bet you all of Pastor Jones' money. Aren't you glad I'm not a betting man? Verse 22. And according to the Torah, almost all things are purged with blood, and without shedding of blood, there's no what? I guarantee you, not every Bible says the same thing. How many Bible says forgiveness of sins? Raise your hand. How many of your Bible says forgiveness? Raise your hand. How many of your Bible says remission? Raise your hand. Come on, a whole bunch of Bibles, only a few people. How many Bible says remission? Raise your hand. Look around. So which word is it? It's three different things. Have you even bothered to look at that in the Greek? The Greek word is aphesis. Now the Greek word aphesis is a word that when you go from the Hebrew, from the Greek text, Textus Receptus, to the Septuagint, to the Hebrew, guess which Hebrew word doesn't connect it to? 50 times, 25 of the 50 times is connected with the Hebrew word jubilee. Now let's read that word again. And instead of forgiveness of sin, of remission, which it lines up perfectly, because when do you declare the Jubilee? What day of the year do you declare the Jubilee? On the day of Yom Kippur. So that's how you verify the book of Hebrews in the context of the Day of Atonement. You see what I mean? But by the way, the shofar, the ram's horn, is the one that you blow on the Day of Atonement in the year of Jubilee. This is something you need to learn. See, right now we have the freedom to blow the shofar any which way we want. But when the altar's rededicated, with all due respect to all of you, as beautiful as it sounded, you cannot do it. because the Torah gave the authority to the priest when the temple's standing. The ram's horn, no one can blow it. They have their gold mouthpiece. They're only on the Day of Atonement in the year of Jubilee, when you declare the year of Jubilee. Now, what's interesting, let's read it again, but instead of the word remission or forgiveness of sins or forgiveness, let's go to the word, what it says. It says, and according to the Torah, all things are purged with blood, and without the shedding of the blood, there's no Jubilee. Now, this is your homework. Go back and read Deuteronomy chapters 15, Leviticus 25 and 27, the laws of Jubilee. And then start reading the book of Leviticus 16. And start connecting Yom Kippur, the service of Yom Kippur, and the year of Jubilee. And see what you're going to find out. The whole book of Hebrews is going to change. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I'm going home now. So now that I just shared that with you, let's go on. What? Well, we're recording, but can you write it down, and I'll gladly answer it. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the temple administration now. Did I get your interest with the whole Jubilee thing? I did that on purpose for you to do your homework now. I'll just throw a hint at you. You got to go and fish. Okay? All right. Temple administration. Many of you study the temple, but you don't really realize how important it is. The temple, let me give you a little ancient Near Eastern perspective of what a temple represented. The temple represented the center of life. The temples were banks. No one there to steal from the gods. So every temple was a bank to the people. Because if you went into a sacred space and you stole from the gods, you got all the curses that come upon you. In Israel, it was the same thing. It was the God of Israel who had a treasury there. That was his throne. Let's go to, somebody go to Ezekiel chapters 43, I think. If I find the right way, I'll read it. Yes, I got it. Ezekiel 43, and I read it this morning, and I want to read it again. It says, verse 6 and 7. Then I heard him speaking to me from the temple while a man stood beside me. He said, Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell in the midst of the children of Israel forever. So that means the temple is the throne of God on the earth. Oh, you don't want the temple? Then you don't want God to rule and reign here. You are challenging the authority of the Lord. That's his throne on the earth. Oh, but that's symbolic. Really? Then how come he said to build it? Because he needs to dwell amongst his people. My king deserves a house that is worthy of his rulership. Oh, we want to build beautiful homes for us, but how about my king's house? You know what I mean? I would love to have billions of dollars that I could just say, build it for the king. You know? Because that means that when the king is enthroned on the earth again, I can't wait to see people start arguing with him. I'm going to sit back with my popcorn box. I was going somewhere with this and I forgot where I was going. Okay, so the temple administration. So the temple is the throne of God on the earth. It's where he places his feet, right? Okay, so what people don't realize, the importance of the temple in the life of Jerusalem. Huge enterprise, provided thousands of jobs. It was the place that righteousness will proceed from. The Lord is the patron. Israel is its client. That means that when a client needed something, then they will come to the king, and then the king will provide for them. If you had a job, if you bring forth the fruit of the labor, and you want to give your best to him in tithe, then you bring it to him in a way that it was in reverence, that it was honorable to the king, the way you approach him. You enter a particular way. You sang certain songs. But I'm not going to focus on the service and the rituals. I want to focus about the duties of the priest and the enterprise and how well organized it was. And I'm going to do my best to connect it to the first century and then our lives today. Is that okay? So there was a temple administration. People don't think about this. Just like I'm sure you have elders, and then you have a board, and then you have people who do different jobs. We did it today. You have a person who plays the drums. You have a person who sings. You have a person who, plays the keyboard. Then you have the person who introduces the speaker. Then you have, everyone has a job to, then you have the brother right there. Without him, I cannot show you the PowerPoint. Everyone has a job. Everyone has purpose and a function. So the teaching really is about function. When you read the Torah, and now I know where I was going to go. My wife keeps telling me, you hit the button and you go off. Trying to stay on point, right? I'm going to read you this. I'm only going to read 8 verses. In Numbers chapters 28, the daily offering. I want you to notice the amount of things they needed for the services. It's only the morning and the afternoon service. Not the Sabbath, not the new moons, not the feast. Just the morning and afternoon. That's not talking about the Musaf, which is the midday, a certain Yom Tov, and the special days. Okay, watch this. You read this, and you're thinking, oh, sacrifices. Let's jump over chapters 9. Oh, 29. You know, we don't even read it. Watch. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, command the children of Israel, and say to them, my offerings, that means that belong to him. Because he provided for you. He gave you health. He gave you a job. You know, he provided for everything. All he wants is only something out of the best so that everyone will know that you're grateful that he's the one who provided. That's the reason for the tithe and the offerings. So when you offer them, it's so that you say, Lord, this is my best for you. Oh, but it was all agriculture in the ancient world. That's part correct. But they'll also have money. They donate it. And I'm going to show you that a little bit more. So, by the way, I'm not doing this teaching because I don't need anything from you. I'm doing the teaching because we need to co-labor more with the local leaderships. You know, sometimes we put more stress in the leadership than we help them. And we think we're doing them a favor because we show up on the Sabbath. Ladies and gentlemen, if we knew our functions, our leaders will have more time to study and equip themselves to teach you. But sometimes, I got to be honest with you, they're dealing with so much nonsense of things that we can take care of ourselves, but we are so petty and so needy sometimes that we have to go get always help for everything. Listen, you don't need the Lord to tell you to make a left turn on the light. Just hit the signal and go. Some people want to be guided to the point that you don't allow your teachers to actually learn themselves. They need to be fed. Amen. Allow them the room. Some things you don't need me to hold your hand in. Some things I do. Amen. Right? Yeah. Anyone who deals with psychology here? You deal with psychology? You know how difficult it is. 90% of the time, it's just people's fear who holds them back. Because they never understand the one thing, passion. What their gifts are and how they can be passionate, and they don't have a short-term plan and a long-term plan. So, continue reading here. My rant is over. In Numbers 28, verse 1, command the children of Israel and say to them, my offerings, my food for my offerings, made by fire, as a sweet aroma to me, and you shall be careful to offer to me at the appointed times. In other words, you don't show up whenever you think. You did it at the time he told you to bring. Specifically this one. He says, watch. And he shall say to them, this is the offering made by fire, which you shall offer to the Lord. 2 lambs in the first year, without blemish, day by day, as a regular burnt offering. That's only for one of the 5 offerings. Only one. Now, the question you have to ask when you read this is, wait a minute, of the first year, well, who's going to be the shepherds? Who's going to make sure that they're unblemished? How do you know if it's 1 year? So that means that you need a new year for the animals. Because every animal needs to be within the framework. Red heifer, 3 years. Certain animals need to be with. So when do you start counting the new years for the animals? Come on now, people. We study the Torah. We don't study the temple, so we don't know these principles. And when I mention anything other than the calendar we have, people go up in arms. So you need a calendar just for livestock, for the temple tithe. It happens in the summer. See? Then you need a new year for the trees. Why? Because you have to count on the 3rd year for the fruits. Remember? That happens in the before spring, right before Nisan. Then how do you know how many years a king is in power? Then you have to have the new year and calendars for kings. The counting is Passover area, Nisan. Then you have to have a year for the jubilee. When do you start counting the jubilee? In Nisan? No, you do it in Tishri. So you need Tishri as the new year for the sabbatical years and the jubilee. When do you start counting the agricultural cycles? Nisan. Nisan, you have everything for the feast. That's why Nisan is the beginning of the month for the agricultural cycle. And the Bible tells you in Exodus that Tishri is the end of the year for the agricultural cycles because you're dealing with latter rains and early rains. Get it? So you need all 4 calendars that are found in the Bible. And we attacked 3 of them. Newsflash, ladies and gentlemen, the new year for the Babylonians was not in Tishri. It was Tishri. I'm sorry. It was Nisan for 12 days. The Akitu ritual. Are you going to throw away Nisan now because the Babylonians kept it in the beginning, in the spring? Is this making sense? No worries. But you have to know who are my shepherds. Who's going to count them? By the way, what was the radius around Jerusalem? Let me go back to this one again. We need to know. This is important. You see the city right there? Let me see if I go to the bigger picture. Right there. You see that right there? Beautiful place. You have Jerusalem and the temple. What was the amount of miles or miles, so radius around the temple that belonged to the temple proper? Every farm within a 15-mile radius belonged to the temple. Everything. By the way, you know the shepherds, when Yeshua was born? Levites. That's why you keep reading the story. They knew already in the temple that something happened. Because they need to make sure they're acceptable for the sacrifices. But we never thought about that. So that means you need shepherds. You need farmland for grazing. You need all these things. It's a huge enterprise. By the way, there was one year that they counted over 246,000 lambs for a Passover. Now, mind you, that the minimum amount of people you need per lamb in the temple when the temple was standing was 10 people, minimum. So now, imagine, 246,000 minus the lowest number, 10. Over 2 million people in Jerusalem that year. You see, so how many lambs do you need? Whole bunch. Right? Who was going to raise them? You see, they all have to be unblemished. So you need the shepherds. Who can determine and who can raise them to the point that you know if they're unblemished? The Levites. So now the Levites, they are all over Israel, also around the temple, trying to raise the lambs for the temple. Well, guess what? Let me keep reading here. It's only one example. All right? And it says, verse 4, 1 lamb shall offer in the morning and 1 lamb offer in the evening. 1/10 of an ephod of fine flour as a grain offering mixed with 1/4 of hinto press oil. Wait a minute. That's the top of the line olive oil. Well, that means that now you got to have all kinds of Levites working in olive. You see? And then you need flour. That means that you need barley. You need wheat. So now you got all this. Imagine if you are, instead of, lawn care, they tells you, by the way, you have a farm, you have vineyards. And then I'm the priest, and I say, by the way, we want to use your vineyards to be the wine for the temple. And you're going to see how much wine they use. Gallons, quarts, a day. You're going to go like, yes. You don't have to worry about work for a long time. You're going to be working. You don't have to worry about, because you're going to have people buying to you every day. When the feasts come around, thank you, Lord. Millions of people show up. They need the wine. And your wine is just like that, any other wine. Your wine is kadosh. It's holy, and the Lord has given you the job to take care of his wine for the temple. Imagine how that will make you feel psychologically. You will not let anybody just abuse your vineyard because you don't understand this is holy to the Lord. You will value your job more than you know, right? Now you feel important because now when you are pruning those vines, you don't understand, you're singing to the Lord. You're saying, Lord, thank you, because now I'm pruning. I'm the gardener in your garden, you see? And now I'm pruning the vines, and then I'm taking the harvest, knowing, like, for example, last night we celebrated Shabbat in my home, and we were drinking a bottle of wine that it comes from Jerusalem, Habracha, right? And then in the mountain of blessing. And the people who collect up the grapes for that bottle for that year are all believers in Yeshua. And we're saying, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam boreh pei agafen. Blessed are you, Lord, King of the universe, who brings forth the fruit of the vine, and the people who collected them are the fulfillment of prophecy that now in the last days the strangers will be your vine dressers, and I'm partaking of a blessing in my house. Talk about all those people, believers in Yeshua, that they've been rejected by Orthodox Judaism, but they didn't care. I want to go to the land. I want to pay my way. I'm going to volunteer. I just want to prune your vineyards, right? Saving them over $200,000 or $300,000 a year. And now we can partake of the fruit of the vine, saying, thank you, Lord, because our believers in Yeshua now become partakers of the original mandate to be the gardeners in the kingdom. So instead of arguing about theology, we should put in our hands into what our role is. Yes? So, verse 6. It is a regular burnt offering, which was ordained on Mount Sinai as a sweet aroma. Verse 7. And its drink offering shall be 1/4 of a hint of each lamb, for each lamb, in a holy place. And you shall pour it out as a drink to the Lord in an offering. The older lamb you shall offer. Now, if you go to Sukkot, oh my Lord, Sukkot, you got 70 offerings, 13, 12, so on and so forth every day. That's a lot of money. So that means you need a whole enterprise. All those buildings right here that you're going to see in a minute require organization, require function. You see, for example, you have electricity, you have a bathroom, you have water, correct? Without electricity and water, is this thing even bothered to be used? Unless it's really cold outside and there's a daylight. But at night, if it's hot, you can't use it. So that means that this place can only be functional if it has the tools needed in order for you to be able to enjoy. Correct? The temple is just buildings. It has a function. So, we have the Nazarite chamber on the southeastern corner, the wood chamber on the northeastern corner. You have the small Sanhedrin on the northeast side of the court of the women. You have the leper's chamber on the northwest corner of the court of the women. The chamber of oils. You have here the court of Israel. You have Beit Hanitzot. You have Beit Hamoked, where the priests will live. You have the Beit Aptinas, where they used to make the incense. And this building back here is called the Forest of Lebanon. It's called Beit Osrot, where they have the police department live there. Yes, it's only something. A few things. Function, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you now how it worked in the temple. So we can learn how we are supposed to function. Fair enough? Is this making sense? This week's Torah portion, trying to outline for you every sacrifice. When we read it, we only focus on sacrifices, and it's boring to us because we're not used to the temple's not there, so we don't know how it works. But if that huge building was still standing today, which this building alone was 23 stories high. This one was about 13 or about 10 stories high. This one alone was the same height as this one. That door was about 8 stories high, and this was about 8 stories high. And you see, how will they make this work? You got thousands of Levites, thousands of priests, and everybody had a job. Talk about a great king giving jobs to everybody. All right, so the temple administration and service by Yosef Yaakov, Judah ben Eisenstein. The affairs of the second temple were managed by a board of 15 appointed officers, Memunim. The Mishnah records the following names of officers of the temple without stating their respective periods of activity, but it is presumed that they were those appointed in the time of Agrippa. That means second temple period. Now, mind you, the same families that was named, that's the same family had their job. The jobs don't change. So if you were the bread makers, that's it, that's your job. God gave you a legacy. Can you imagine? The temple was a bakery. The temple was a steakhouse. You never think about that. I've talked about it this morning to the congregation. They were blown away. They never thought about it. Can you imagine? I mean, how many of you people grill here? I'm not talking about burgers and hot dogs. I'm talking about steaks. Sorry, Americans, but you need to learn from the South Americans. When they say, come to a barbecue, it's not hamburgers and hot dogs. It shocked me. I was like, they're talking about steaks. And all they do is put salt, man. And it tastes so good. I'm going, how in the world? So it made me realize about the temple. It's a steakhouse. And I mentioned this morning, I said, imagine the high priest. He is fasting for 24 hours, and now he is trying to do the service in a fast in a steakhouse, and he has to offer everything. And he's thirsty, and he has to do the libation offering. And he's hungry, he has to offer the bread. Can't wait for Yom Kippur to be over. But we don't think about that. We only look at this just as an overall picture without getting it, right? All right, so watch this. 15 families. It's a board of people. Now, mind you, each family are hundreds of people in that family. You know that in 2 Chronicles, 1 Chronicles 24. Okay, the 24 priestly courses. They all had a job. But we don't know about the job, but we don't want to study the Mishnah either. See, the Bible doesn't have to explain to us about these families, because the Bible was not written to us in the 21st century. It's for us to learn, but we were not the original audience. You follow? So some things we're so far removed, we don't get it because we didn't live there. I mean, some of you remember America 40 years ago? It's changed quite a lot, hasn't it? Okay, so imagine now the Bible 2,000 years ago in the first century. Now imagine the Bible 3,700 years ago at the time of Moses. Do we have a lot of studying to do? You see, that's what I'm trying to do. So